Guys, I'm excited to share with you. We have a guest speaker today. His name is Reverend Dr. We'll just go with Reverend Alan Rathman. Some of you guys know Alan. Alan has been part of our church for a long time. He's actually one of our district leaders. He is actually in charge of developing the next generation of pastors and leaders and missionaries in our family of churches. We've talked about, we're part of a family of churches called the Christian and Missionary Alliance. Maybe you've heard us say CMA in shorthand. And Alan is one of our district leaders. And so Alan has 3 kids. And they've all turned out incredibly well, so good job. But I think that's Sandra's doing, so thank you, Sandra, for that. So guys, will you just join me in welcoming Alan as he can come up and share God's Word with us?
You always get nervous when Nathan introduces you, that's for sure. You just never know how it's going to go. I'm going to pull this up a little bit here. There we go. It's always good to be here. I remember I had the joy of coming into my position in the district. I used to oversee church planting when I first came into this role. And so I got to be around the beginning years of City Alliance, and I got to worship in the coffee shop when you guys were still worshiping there. I wasn't early enough for the YMCA. I regret that. So then I could say I'm part of the whole history. But in the coffee shop, I remember a big gathering up at Spence's backyard with leaders and seeing an awesome prayer time there for that. It was beautiful. And then I remember the great celebration it was when this building came to be part of that. And what the work you guys have just continued to do to make this a place that still maintains its worshipful structure, but yet is modernized and comfortable for families coming in is wonderful. And of course, hearing about news about the kids, fantastic. It's so encouraging to be here. I've been looking forward to this. It was like, when Nathan asked me, I'm like, if my calendar is empty, it's like, yes. The answer is yes. I'm happy to be here, and it's great to be here. Plus, it is the beginning of Little League time, so that makes me really excited. I'm actually really, Brandon, my son, who does college ministry here in Williamsport. A lot of you know him. When he had the opportunity to come to Williamsport, knowing how much he loves baseball, that he got from his dad, that love baseball, I was like, man, what a deal for him. And he's really settled into Williamsport. He and his wife, Cassie, and of course, our grandson, Micah, love living in Williamsport, and Little League is a big part of that. He actually married into a Little League family because his father-in-law does stuff for Little League, and so that's cool. And I'm excited about that happening this year. I follow it pretty closely, I would say. I try to come to a game every year now that my son lives here. It makes it an easy way to do that. Pretty excited for you guys this year. Grand Slam Parade. If you're not a baseball fan, you may not realize it's a kind of a big deal that Jack Morris is the Grand Marshal this year. He probably pitched one of the most amazing games in World Series history, and actually one that was in my lifetime. So I can remember watching it live on TV. Game 7 of the 1991 World Series. I'm sure that when they have the breakfast where he's kind of introduced, that he will talk about that. If he doesn't, somebody should ask him. But also, when you have the Williamsport Welcomes the World, that's what it's called, right? The week before the championship weekend. Tom Glavine is here for that, and they were against each other in that World Series. They didn't pitch in the same games, but they were on the opposite teams. And that was a classic World Series. So it's a great treat for Little League this year to have both of those. I'm holding out for the day, and it's probably going to be a long time in the future, but I'm looking forward to the day, hopefully, that Jason Varitek, former catcher for the Boston Red Sox, that is my team, when he hopefully will be the Grand Marshal, because he's one of only 3 players in history that have played in the Little League World Series, the College World Series, and the Major League World Series. So hopefully, someday, he'll be the Grand Marshal, and I guarantee that I'll be standing here watching that one go by here, because that'll be fun. I'll have to buy a Jason Varitek jersey for that day as well. I do not have one of those at this point in time, but certainly he's on their agenda once he stops being involved in baseball, which could be a while. He's currently one of the coaches on the Red Sox. But I'm excited, too, because I get to speak about 2 things this morning that makes me really happy. One is parenting. Parenting has been one of the greatest joys of my life, also one of the greatest stresses of my life. Everybody knows how that goes together, whether you're a kid being parented, or you're a parent, or you're a grandparent, watching your kids parent your grandkids. It all works together, how that works, but I love parenting. I've loved the opportunity. The challenge, of course, When they're really little, you tend to have a lot of control on what happens in their life. And then as they get older, you lose control and hope to maintain some level of influence. But that changes over time, but there's joy in that and how that all comes together. But the fact that I get to do that in the context of baseball is like a win-win. I've had to, in my life, I did not have a good relationship with my father. He was a very difficult father. I won't elaborate on that this morning. That's probably for another context. But of course, God, as good as he is, as Nathan was referencing earlier, used that to shape my life. I'm really thankful because the difficulty of my father pushed me towards the faith of my mother. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. And so I'm really grateful for that. I often wonder what would have happened in my life if my dad didn't follow Jesus, but he was just a nice guy who cared about my sports and my stuff in life. Would I have clung to the faith of my mom? I'm not sure if I would have. So I'm so glad that God allowed that difficulty that actually helped cultivate my heart for faith and hope and love. But as part of that growing up, trying to escape from my father, like baseball was weird for me. It was my escape. So I have like a ridiculous amount of useless baseball trivia in my mind that came from reading about baseball, from scouring baseball cards to watching. I don't even want to know how much baseball I watched as a kid. And of course, playing. I was not in an official Little League thing. I know that's anathema. We were just in a regular baseball league. But nonetheless, I did play baseball when I was younger and loved that. And it's always been a special place in my heart. There's still one of the fun things that I love doing in life is just go to a new ballpark and just walk out and see the field. Because, you go to football games or soccer games or basketball, all the fields are the same. But you go to a baseball field and everyone is different. And so it just changes how you look at stuff. And that's the way life is. Like everything is different. You never know what's coming at you. And that's the way it is with parenting too, right? You never know what's coming at you. And so this morning, what I'm hoping for today is to follow up on Nathan's message last week and talking about the baseball diamond with raising Homerun Kids. So I'm going to just take a while to keep things going here this week and to keep this train of thought in your mind. I'm not usually a whiteboard guy, all right? But I want to do that this morning because I think it's great to have that diamond that we're working on, the baseball diamond. So I'm also not much of an art guy, so man, oh days, this could be a double whammy. So you're going to have mercy on me here, what we got. But I am going to draw the home plate better than Nathan last week because his home plate was not accurate. It should come out here. It's a square because baseball, the plate is not a square. All right, take that note. Please, somebody make sure in the future that he draws home plate correctly because I watched it last week and Nathan, I'm sorry, you didn't do it. You'll get it right next week. And of course, these look good here. We got that. Those aren't so hard to draw, I understand, although they're not rectangles. But they are bigger now than they used to be, but that's another story for another day. But anyhow, I'm excited about this. This is great. Of course, Nathan nailed it last week in saying that the place to start is to connect with God. I mean, I probably didn't write big enough for you there, but we got to connect with God. Starting anywhere else is useless. We want to build our families on God. The passage that Maddie read for us, and I'm going to allude to a little bit later in the message, it's building on the rock of God's teaching. That's what we want for our lives. It's also what we want for our kids. And it starts by connecting with God, not using God's system of morality, but actually God himself. We connect our kids with God, not just the truth about God, but God himself, and that's beautiful. Today, I'm going to hit on character. All right. Oh, there's always a danger of not spelling correctly when you're in front of people, too. That's always a problem. And of course, and this is obviously who we become as people. What kind of people are we? And then up here we had community, right? Because you don't do life alone. Matter of fact, it's nearly impossible to do life alone. And if you try to do life alone, you actually hurt yourself by doing life alone. So you need community either way you look at it. One of the earliest verses that we taught our kids to memorize when they were growing up was Proverbs 13:20. I highly recommend it. And that is this: he who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. From the very beginning, we would talk to our kids about the kind of friends they had. We taught our kids that essentially there's 3 big decisions you can make in your life. One is, will you trust Jesus and be part of God's family? One, and the second is, what friends will you choose? And the third is, who will you marry? If you hit all three of those decisions, life is going to be a really good thing, even if it really has challenges with it, which of course every life has challenges with us. But if you get those three right, you have a foundation to build on. If you don't, then it's going to be even harder. But they're all about relationships, living in community with God, living in community with your friends, and living in community with your family is a beautiful thing. And then the last one over here, of course, is competence, understanding our kids' talents and their wiring. That's the one I'm worried about spelling the most. But, their gifts, their talents, their personality, understanding. We want to understand them. Every kid is different. And we want to make sure that we're seeking to raise them in a way that fits them. Our kids were different. And it was really important for me to not try to make, for instance, Brandon's younger brother, Brian, to be like his brother, because they are not alike at all. In some ways they're alike, but they're very different in their personality approaches and in what they're good at in life. And if I said, oh, this is working with Brandon, and I tried to make Brian like him, I would have hurt Brian. So from the beginning, I was trying to understand how Brian was wired to hopefully help him find his way and how God made him. So that's the picture here as you're going forward. This is where we're aiming. We're at first base this week. I'm glad to be part of first base because honestly, I care about obviously connecting with God, but this is the one that makes me think a lot. I find it I'm filled with gratitude that I get to be in the role that I'm in our district, in which I am focused on developing our workers and helping our team develop our workers, because it's about the heart. It's about the kind of people we are. It's not just the skills or the competence we have, but who we are is more important than what we actually do. It's easy for us to get, as parents, to get pulled into prioritizing activities over attitude. But if we can help our children become people who love God and then love others the way God loves us, the rest of life has a much better chance of fitting together and turning out well, even if it's accompanied by a lot of suffering. We want our kids to know that the kind of person they are is more important than what they accomplish in life. I've prayed often for my kids who are now 30, 28, and just short of 26. My daughter's birthday is next weekend. And you're saying, how can that young-looking guy have such old kids? I appreciate you thinking that ahead of time, but it is true. I am old enough to have kids that old. But I have prayed often for my kids that, Lord, whatever you want them to do in life, I'm not as concerned about their occupation. I just want them to grow up loving you with their whole being and loving others the way you love us. And I'm thankful that God has been gracious in answering that over time. And they're not perfect by any means, because their father and mother aren't perfect. Their mother's a little closer than their dad. But nonetheless, and Nathan wasn't far off. She has a lot to do with how our kids have turned out, and I'm really grateful for that. But if you have to choose with your kids having wildly successful careers and having average careers but being rich in love, then I hope that you will choose to have your kids be rich in love more than having wildly successful careers. And that is something that you need to feel deep in your heart so that your kids feel that from you. And the way they feel that is by you being rich in love for who they are, no matter what they accomplish in life. So the whole thing, though, is I think we all need to take a deep breath. So every parent and grandparent and kid in here, take a deep breath for a second. Because parenting is stressful, right? That's not news, right? That's not like, wow, Alan, I never knew that before. Thank you for sharing that important piece of information to me this morning. But sleepless nights start from the very beginning. I remember standing in the hospital room overlooking the Susquehanna River in Harrisburg the day that Brandon was born. I'm holding him in my arms, looking out at the river, and I'm thinking, I love this kid more than I can imagine. Now what do I do? Like, no one prepares you well enough to be a parent. You're learning every day is a new learning experience, and somebody could try to teach you the class of how to do it, but it's still different for your kids and your setting, and so it can be really stressful. And sometimes we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves our kids would be awesome people who make amazing accomplishments, and we can feel like we have to be like Olympic level parents. But the reason I want you to take a deep breath this morning is I want you to accept the reality that you can't be a perfect parent. You can't. Stop thinking you can. And you may say that on the surface, you may agree with me and say, yeah, I can't. No, I want you to embrace that you can't be a perfect parent. I feel really blessed for our kids and adults, and they've chosen good spouses, and I'm really thankful for that. And we're starting the next generation as well. I'm thankful for that. But I can tell you for sure that when all of my kids moved out from home, my wife and I had lots of conversations. I wish we'd have done this differently. I wish I'd have done this differently. I wish I would have done more of this. And you can reflect back and you just can't do it all. You can't do it perfect, and you're not going to raise perfect kids. So it's better just to take a deep breath and say, okay, God, just use me to do the best that I can through your help, the power of your Spirit working through me. So I'm hoping today that this message helps you to realize what you can do. And I'm just going to read again the passage from Luke chapter 6. Just the first paragraph, actually, though, verses 43 to 45 about good fruit and bad fruit. Jesus said, and the apostles recorded, a good tree doesn't produce bad fruit. On the other hand, a bad tree doesn't produce good fruit. For each tree is known by its fruit. Figs aren't gathered from thorn bushes, and grapes picked from a bramble bush. A good person produces good out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil person produces evil out of the evil stored up in his heart. For his mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. The first thing I want us to do that I think is a wise thing to do as a parent is to embrace an agrarian perspective. And you're like, agrarian? Come on, Alan. What is that word? Well, it might be a new word for you today, but you can see the root there, right? It's agriculture. I want you to realize that your first job is to see that Jesus is talking about fruit in this passage, right? It's not about you developing products with your kid. You're not trying to raise your kid to produce widgets in their life. You want them to have fruit in their life. Things like love and faith and hope and integrity and compassion and justice. In Jesus' mind, that's all fruit. And so we need to embrace an agrarian or an agricultural perspective if we're going to be in sync with what Jesus is talking about character. That means for parenting, that means that raising kids is a lot more about cultivating the soil of their hearts and planting good seeds than it is about getting them in the right programs or the right activities or the right school or the right training. It's cultivating the soil of their hearts and planting good gospel seed. I love that last week Nathan started with Deuteronomy chapter 6, right? Because in there he talks about impressing, or you pointed out, sharpening the truth of God in their hearts. Because that's where it all flows from. Or as Scott Turansky and Joanne Miller said in the title of their book, Parenting is Heart Work. Can we say that out loud? I just like the title of that book is awesome. Can we say it out loud together? Parenting is heart work. And so is grandparenting. Right? Grandparents, you have a unique opportunity in stage of life because you have learned what you would have done differently when you raised your kids. And you have the chance to be a sage that can contribute to the development of your grandkids' heart. Don't miss that opportunity to invest in that way. Now, if talking about the heart is new for you this morning, and it might not be, but if it is, just let me say that Scripture teaches that the heart is the center of every human being. And we're not talking, when Scripture says that, it's not talking about the physical heart-pumping vessel. It's talking about really an immaterial part of us where we think, where we feel, where we decide what is important, where life really flows from, where love flows from, where our priorities flow from, where what we treasure. In some weird way, I treasured baseball in my heart as a kid. That was something that happened in my heart. In a weird kind of journey, because I had let baseball, this is kind of weird maybe in your mind, but because I had let baseball into my heart as kind of an escape and a refuge from my father, when I grew up and my team would lose, it would be devastating for days, which when I grew up, that was a lot for the Red Sox, okay? They win a lot now, but in the days they didn't when I was growing up. Why did that matter so much to me? Because I had let it into my heart. It wasn't just a game on a field that somebody played, but it had become a refuge for me, so it really mattered. And I've had to battle that as part of my, what we call a sanctification journey, a growth journey with Jesus, is to make sure that Jesus is bigger than in my heart than anything else. It's a really big deal. That's why Scripture says in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Everything you do. That's right, in keeping what Jesus said, right? That out of the good stored up in a person, good comes from them. And out of the evil stored up in an evil person, evil comes from them. Because it all flows from the heart. Thinking back as well to where Nathan went last week, remember that. But also, when Jesus spoke to the religious leaders of his day, what did he say to their biggest problem was? That with their lips they honored God, but their hearts were far from him. So we can go through all the motions, we can do some of the right actions on the outside, but our hearts can still be far from God. And then we're not going to connect with God or develop godly character. We're not going to have healthy community. And then even our confidence gets messed up if we're not operating with valuing God and valuing what God values in our hearts. So what does this mean then for parenting? First of all, it means that parenting is not about control. And that's what can happen to us when we get stressed out and think we have to raise great kids. Then we try to control kids to become great kids. And guess what? It doesn't work. Every farmer, right? If we're going agrarian here, agricultural, every farmer knows they're not in control. Sure, they can cultivate the soil, they can rotate crops, they can add fertilizer as needed, but at the end of the day, if they don't have the weather cooperate, something they are completely not in control of, if the weather doesn't cooperate with them, their crop is going to be greatly reduced. They're not in control. And when our children are little, it's easy for us to trick ourselves into thinking that we're in control, and if we can just do all the right things and give them all the best opportunities, then they'll turn out great. Now, of course, as parents, we do have some control over our children, especially when they're really young. You control their bedtime, you control what they eat, or at least try to. You control a lot. You get completely control when they're little who they hang out with. They can't choose friends on their own. There's so much of what you control when they're little, but that changes as they grow older, and you don't have control. But even when they're little, there's things that you don't have control over. You don't have control over if they have health problems. That's hard. You don't have control over the terrible twos. We all know that. When is this going to end? I thought it stopped at 3. That means that for us, focusing on cultivating and not controlling is how we're going to help develop them into the character of the people that we want. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't correct behavior. If a kid is behaving badly, we should correct that. But as they get older and they can interact with us, it's important to correct it in their heart, not just in their outward actions. And they need to understand why we're correcting it in their heart. The sooner we can learn to speak really to their heart, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the better off that we'll be, and the less stress we'll add on ourselves, because we're teaching our kids to think and feel and prioritize for themselves as we do that. So what really matters most in parenting is cultivating the hearts of our children to treasure God and what God treasures, or to value God and what God values. That's what matters most. How do we do that? What does that look like? Let's just say this again out loud. We're going to do it together. It's not about control. It's about cultivation. Can we say that out loud? It's not about control. It's about cultivation. Notice what Jesus says, right? In verse 45 of that passage, he says, a good person produces good out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil person produces evil out of the evil stored up in his heart, for his mouth speaks from the overflow of his heart. The phrase stored up there is literally the word treasure. I love that. Right? So a good person treasures good things in their heart, and good things come out of them. An evil person, conversely, treasures bad things in their heart, and bad things come out of them. So the work of parenting is about cultivating our kids' hearts with them. We can't do it for them, but with them, so that they treasure what God treasures. And of course, Those are things like faith, hope, love, justice, righteousness, compassion, other people, and not treasuring things that are harmful to them. Or sometimes they can treasure the wrong things too highly, the right good things too highly, like I did with baseball. There was nothing wrong with baseball. I had a lot of fun with baseball, great memories with baseball. But when I treasured it too highly, it actually distracted me from God. So we're working with our kids to cultivate their hearts so that they treasure what God treasures and what they treasure God and what God treasures as well. So, and then what we need to see from that, what flows automatically, is that what a person treasures in their heart will show up in their actions, and that becomes the character of their lives. All right, so doing something one time does not make it become enforced as your character. But when we treasure something to the point that it becomes a regular part of our actions, that will be our character. And we're trying to cultivate our kids' hearts so that they treasure the right things, so that it leads to the right actions, so it produces character that lasts, so that by the time they leave us, and they sure do, we can be thankful that they're making good decisions with God on a foundation of good character. And that's what we're aiming for. That's what we want, desperately want. We want them to treasure God, not just go to church. We want them to treasure love, not just be nice to others so they get what they want. Have you ever considered that loving others and doing things so other people will love you can look a lot the same? I want my kids to love others, not so that other people will love them, but because they value and love others. We want them to treasure truth, not just avoid lies, because honesty is the best policy and it works out well for you. I want them to love truth. I want them to treasure truth. If we can faithfully work with God, because this cultivating work, we're cooperating in two directions. We're cooperating with God, because He's got a plan working in their hearts, and we're cooperating with our kids. We can't control God, we can't control our kids, but we can cooperate with both to see character develop in their lives through cultivated hearts that treasure God and what God treasures. And if that happens, then we can sit back as they get older and know that even when they make mistakes, they're going to learn from them, and they're going to keep growing as people. You have 18 years with your kids, and man, that marble thing was so loud last week online. I thought I was, woo! But that was a great illustration, how those days just disappear. And to understand how much our days disappear, what I want to know is that when my kids went off to college, I would rather have sent them with good character than a full scholarship any day of the week. So what happens then? When we cultivate our children's hearts, then we're preparing them to build a strong life on the words of Jesus. And don't you want that? I'm a huge Princess Bride fan. I know that says something about me right there. And if you don't even know what I'm talking about when I say that, I feel sorry for you. It's only one of the best movies of all time. Can I get an amen? Amen? All right, it's a good congregation. That's good. That was a good turnaround. That's good. But in a heated moment where Vizzini and Wesley are having a conversation, and Vizzini says, "Life is pain. Anyone that tells you Wesley says, "Life is pain. Anybody that tells you otherwise is selling you something." Your kids are going to face pain. I hate to say that. I don't want your kids to face pain. I don't want my kids to face pain. When our precious little grandson Micah was born, he had allergies, and you feel as a parent, they felt helpless. How do we do this? I didn't want them to go through it. I didn't want my grandson to go through that, but it's like we live in a broken world that, praise God, someday it's going to be completely renewed. Jesus is Lord over that. He's overcoming his enemies now, and someday all evil, all sickness, all death, all tears will be gone. Praise God for that. But in the middle of that, there is pain and there is suffering, and every person encounters it. In fact, if you want to love, you will suffer, because your love isn't always returned. But if we can build our lives on the words of Jesus, we can be strong in the face of suffering, and, as alluded to by Nathan earlier, we can have joy even in the face of suffering. And that's what character is about, because character is strength in our lives. Somebody that doesn't have character ends up being weak and making bad decisions about who they spend time with in community, and then they don't invest in they have the competence and become the best version of who they can be. Yes, it all starts with a connection with God, but character is the foundation. Character built on the words of Jesus is what makes him strong. That's why Jesus wrote this or spoke this in the rest of that passage in Luke. He said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do the things I say? I will show you what someone who is like, who comes to me, hears my words and acts on them. He's like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. When the flood came, the river crashed against that house and couldn't shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears and does not act is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The river crashed against it, and immediately it collapsed. And the destruction of that house was great." When we cultivate the hearts of our kids, they're going to be strong, even when the storms come. They'll be the kind of people that can build a strong and loving future family after they leave your family. They will be hard-working people of integrity, no matter what career that they choose. They will be able to make the lemonade out of the lemons that come their way. And you will have the freedom of knowing that whatever decisions they make, there's always going to be a rock underneath them to keep growing through mistakes and through successes, because they have that foundation built on Jesus' words. So where do we go from here if we're going to be people that are cooperating with God and with our children to cultivate the hearts of our kids and planting good seeds in the soil of their hearts? It's a very deep and broad topic. We could talk, have a series of Saturday seminars where we unpack this for a while. You can have conversations together with your friends, and I strongly encourage that. But let me just give you just a few closing thoughts about the idea of cultivating the hearts of our kids. What can you do for that? First of all, top thing, include God in every part of the life of your family. Every part. So great to hear the good news about City Alliance Kids. It's incredibly important for churches to help families understand God's word and apply it to their lives. But you can't delegate the disciple of your children to the church. They need to see it in every part of your life. Matter of fact, Nathan spoke to that last week, right? When that Deuteronomy 6 passage, let me hit that again here this morning. You did a great job unpacking that, by the way. Thank you for that. That was good about the doorposts and all that. But it says in verses 7 through 9 of Deuteronomy 6, "Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up." That's a lot of life. "Bind them as a sign on your hand. Let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your city gates." Notice there's a community aspect there too, not just the local home. But the point is this: it's not just so that people would wear boxes on their hands or on their foreheads or have signs above your door. We have a scripture verse above our door, Joshua 24:15. It's been there for decades. All those are good. But that's not the point. The point is, what he's trying to say is, let it fill your whole life. No one can do that for you, because no matter what you have other people contributing, if they don't see it in the home, it's not going to soak into their life. It's not going to take root in their life, right? I've seen this a lot with kids. Honestly, you can have kids that go to Christian school and it's a great environment for them and they thrive and they love Jesus. But you can also have kids that go to a Christian school and it's not at home and they have a worse time walking with God than kids that went to public school, because they saw it didn't make sense to them. this is really important enough to go here all day long, but then it's not really part of my family's life. Let me give you a few examples of our family as we grew up. One of the fun things that we did was highs and lows. Maybe some of you have heard it this way. I've heard a recent thing more of highs and lows and buffaloes. So it's the highs of the day, the lows of the day, and then the weird things of the day, all right? We just did highs and lows. We didn't have any buffaloes when I grew up. I mean, when our kids were growing up. But every night we had dinner together, and that was really important. Family dinners are huge for cultivating the hearts of kids because conversations happen around the dinner table. But every person, and mom and dad included, shared their high of the day, their low of the day. And then dad, much to my kids' chagrin, often would start to unpack some of that. Oh, what made that so valuable? Oh, why did that hurt so much? You know, what made you be happy about that? And we'd talk about that. Now, these conversations didn't go on for hours. They were pretty quick, most of the time, right, dear? Yeah, she's saying, yeah, not as quick as you think they were sometimes. But yeah. Another thing that my kids would tell you about, and were ticked at me growing up, but it was good for them, is that actually we would dissect TV shows or movies that we watched all the time. Sometimes at really critical moments, Dad would pause it and say, what do you think Jesus would say about this? But the important thing is we weren't trying to protect them from everything, but we wanted them to have those conversations when we were around. We wanted to make it part of life, even their entertainment parts of their life. Or a simple thing, made it part of our life. I love nature. God has communicated to us through his inspired word, but it also says that God has spoken to us through creation. I pointed that out when we traveled. We went to vacation spots on purpose. Love it. So thankful. Because it's just those little things, day after day, that make a big deal. Second, I would like to encourage you to learn, and this is a practice. It really is something you have to learn, to practice speaking to your children's heart. Talk to them often about why your family does what it does. Don't just go to church. Tell them why church is important for you. Don't just tell the truth. Tell them why truth is important. So, for instance, when our kids were growing up, like the biggest sin you commit in our house was lying. But as our kids got to late preschool age, elementary school, the things that we would explain to us is that we tell the truth because truth builds trust, and trust builds love. And if we don't have trust, we can't have love, and our whole family is going to suffer. Right? That's speaking to their hearts. It's letting them know why we do what we do. We don't just not lie because lying is bad. Why is it bad? God didn't just make arbitrary commands for us to pass on or arbitrary directions. He gave them because he built creation on his truth. And it's because he loves us that he gave us those things. Another helpful thing that I would encourage is to learn to ask your kids what instead of why. Why puts our kids on the defensive? Why did you lie to us? How do you think your kid feels when you say, why did you lie to us? Suddenly, the spotlight's out. And now it's like, and now they know they're guilty. But if you can say, what made you lie to your daddy right now? You're actually helping them step out of the problem and look at it with you. So you say something like, what made you lie to daddy instead of telling him the truth? Now it's not you did it, but what made you do it? Because we all have motives. You're addressing the motives of their heart. What made you do it? You might get answers like, because I was afraid I'd get in trouble if I told the truth. And my answer would be, but now you're going to get in more trouble because you didn't tell the truth. Because truth undermines, not telling the truth undermines trust. And without trust, we can't have relationships. And then as they got older and teenagers and wanted more freedom and responsibility, I said, if we don't have trust, we can't give you freedom. Because freedom is built on trust. All those things work together if we learn to ask what. But if they do something wrong, you say, why did you do that? You just shut down the conversation. You put them on the defensive, and now you're the prosecutor and they're the defense. Come alongside them by asking, what made you do what you do? Then you can follow up with a conversation about that decision. And last, repent when you don't live out with God as your treasure and what God treasures. Because you're going to screw up as parents. And your kids need to know that when you do, you're willing to admit it. When you're not consistent with your values, let them know. One of the most memorable things, I'm sure all our kids remember this, especially our daughter, but we are having a particular tough time with our daughter when she is around, I don't know, early high school or something like that, about gratitude. Anybody ever had any problems with their kids in gratitude? You know, you give them a lot, and it's like, why aren't you more grateful? And it was like a really big deal for me. Like, gratitude is incredibly important for me. If you look at our minivan, which we didn't drive up today, it says the license plate is 1 of 10. Not because I'm 1 of 10 kids, I am an only child, but because of the story of Jesus where 10 lepers came to him, and he healed them, and only 1 came back to thank him. Gratitude is a big deal for me. So when I was struggling with my daughter with gratitude in her high school years, one time, I don't even remember what she was not grateful for, but I lost it. And we had to leave somewhere, and don't interfere with the schedule no matter how bad things are going. We got in the van, and now the whole family is an audience to Dad losing his cool. And I'm driving down the road, looking in the rearview mirror, screaming, and I'm just embarrassed to even talk about this, but it was real. And of course, once the situation subsided, I had to go back and talk about how I handled the problem wrong. Now, was I right about my daughter not being grateful? I sure was right. But I was totally wrong in how I went about it, and I did not help her become more grateful through screaming at her. I guarantee that you don't accomplish much with explosive anger. Thankfully, I didn't have that much, and I'm really grateful for that. But I had to repent to my kids that I messed up. Those can be the most valuable learning experiences for your kids when they see that mom and dad take what they believe so seriously that they'll be honest and confess when they make a mistake. Those are examples of cultivating the heart of your kids, of working with them so that the truth of God gets into their heart, the soil of their heart gets cultivated so it treasures God and what God treasures. And that at the same time, you're planting good seed that can sprout up in their hearts. So what I would like to do in closing this morning is really to pray a blessing on all the parents and grandparents here who have a lot of opportunity to impact their kids, influence their kids. I'd like to pray a blessing on you. And I'm going to pray a blessing on the kids too, even though most of them aren't in the room, to have hearts that are open to be cultivated with the truth of God. So will you receive that blessing? If you want to receive that blessing, then I'm going to just encourage you to sit at your seat with just your hands up and say, as a way of saying to the Lord, Lord, I want this blessing. Father in heaven, I thank you so much that you created us and you wired us to have life flow from our hearts. That love can flow from our hearts if we treasure love in our hearts. That joy can flow in from our hearts if we treasure joy. That hope can flow from our hearts as we treasure hope. That justice and righteousness and compassion can flow from our hearts. And so, Lord, I pray for I bless all the parents and grandparents of the children at City Alliance. And even if those children aren't here because they're grandparents and their kids are living somewhere else in the world, I pray for blessings on them to have wisdom to cultivate the hearts of their children so that their children treasure you and treasure what you treasure. And I pray that these parents and grandparents would have wisdom and knowledge of your truth so that they can plant seeds of your truth in their children and grandchildren. And Lord, last I pray for all the children of City Alliance Church and all the children that are related to the grandparents that are in part of City Alliance Church, that every single one of those children would have soft hearts, that they would have hearts that are receptive to the love and the wisdom of their parents and grandparents, and that you would keep the conversations going that cultivate their hearts and plant the seeds of your truth in them. Lord, please multiply this blessing over and over again. We thank you for all this in Jesus' name.